Hello, I'm Albany.
I'm Lauren. And I'm Tate, and this is our ENG6 final project dice game.
So first, I will be showing you what we did for the die. So we essentially created a loop that cycles through each die 1 through 6 and selects random numbers and images through these functions: select random roll and image select 6. Here you can see select random roll, in which if the player chose to keep the die, roll does not change. However, if they did not choose to keep the die, it will generate a random number between 1 and 6. And then here is the image select function, in which, depending on the number of the roll, it will generate an image associated with that roll. Now I will show you how we coded in how the players can keep the die. So we essentially first make sure that the player has rolled at least once, otherwise that it sets the keep value to false. And then if they have already rolled, we created an array that keep checkbox values, which is plugged into this function check if true. And then that function essentially checks to make sure that no more than 3 die are already kept, or otherwise it will set it to false. If no more than 3 die are kept, it will allow you to keep the die. I'll now show you what we did, or some of the things that I did in order to code in the rules. First, I put all the rules in an array and sorted them to make it easier to compare. I use functions like all to see if all of the numbers are equal to 1. I use functions such as is equal to compare 2 different arrays for things like royal flushes and partial flushes, which are one of every number, or 5 sequential numbers. I use things like length to see how many ones the player rolled and execute code accordingly, as you can see here. I also use functions such as unique to cut down on the duplicates for things like partial flushes, as you can see here. And I also used or statements in order to compare the fact that when you roll 5 of a kind or 4 of a kind, those numbers can be anywhere within the sorted numbers, essentially. So you can have the bottom 5 numbers be equal or the top 5 numbers be equal. And that is also continued throughout our code here.
So first thing with the sounds is that here is an example of a sound function. The call here is once triple, and this calls to an audio file and then manipulates the length of the file as well as the frequency to customize it for the particular event we have it playing for. And here within our app is an example of where the sound is implemented, in that we have the app called to the function. As you can note that all of the sound functions that have been implemented have no input, and so they just run as is. For the object-oriented programming, we defined the class players and scores to have 2 objects for player 1 and player 2, and then we've defined several methods for various categories underneath that relate to the players. An example of the implementation for our object-oriented programming is having this external function, clearing all score, which plays for an event where the score for the turn, as well as the score for the banks, as well as the total score, is cleared depending on the turn for the player. And so here we notice that the object and the method is called here, and then the turn is switch. And so an example of where that comes into play in terms of our app, as opposed to just the external function, is that we have this relates to the score table, in that we have, as it edits, we have the object called to as well as the method for the object for our table within our cell array. And some benefits to having object-oriented programming are that we don't have to have separate variables for every single thing that we want to call to, such as the player name, the temporary score, and the bank score. And it is much easier for someone else reading the code to track what changes are going on.
So the reason why we created 3 different apps is because for the main menus app, we're able to allow players to either choose which games they want to play, whether it's mudslide or 2-die game, and after they press the button, the different app runs and it deletes the menu app. And the reason why we created an instructions app outside of our game is so that players during the game can choose to reopen the instructions app by clicking the rules button, and it brings them to the instructions app. And then if you press the exit app, you can delete it and go back to the main app of the game. And then also for the winning screen, if players want to replay the game or go back into the main menu to choose a different game, they're also able to do that. So another thing I was in charge of was setting the GUI lamps that will show whether it's player 1's turn or player 2 turns, based off if the light is green, which means that is their turn, versus gray, which is not their turn. So first I initialize the lamp colors to be gray. I also put it in the roll dice function, which is able to determine whether whose turn it is. And if it's player 1's turn, then it'll be green, and then player 2 will be gray, and then if else, it'll be switched. I also put it in the continue function because it needs to initialize in the instruction screen whether the players chose player 1 to be first or player 2 to be first, and it'll indicate like on the game who was chosen to be first. I was also in charge of creating the mini tables for the game to display previous rolled points and the combination of points. For instance, for the combination table, that if they roll a combination under the if-else statements, that if 4 to 5 ones were rolled, then it will say like lost entire score. So it'll tell what the player rolled, and then it'll tell them how many points were gained or how many points were lost. And for the previous play table, it'll just input whatever added score was gained for that player. And for the 2 dice game, everything is the same of all the different apps. And the only thing that there is in the 2 dice game is that there's no key buttons or combinations. So it's strictly just 2 dice. But you can see here that we coded if-else statements to check whether roll die 1 or die 2 is, if one of them equal 1, then their temporary score is lost and no points are earned. And if they rolled 2 ones, then their entire score is lost.
So we will now go through a quick demonstration of our game. So first off, in the game, you can choose which game you want to go play. And first we're going to demonstrate Mudslide. So it will open up the game app where it will first display the rules. And then you can choose which player starts. You can choose player 1, in which then the continue button will show up, or you can choose player 2, and you can also switch, and this should not affect how the game is played. After you can also name yourselves here in these edit fields, and when you hit continue, it'll essentially create 2 objects of player 1 and player 2, or whatever names you choose. So as you can see here, it is player 1's turn, and so since player 1 has not rolled yet, they cannot keep the dice as clearly shown. There's no roll bonus displayed yet, and there's no previous play displayed yet since there has been no roll. As soon as you roll the dice, it will then show how many points you have earned for that previous play, and it will show, oh, we got no combination of dice, so we got no extra points, we simply earned 25 points. And since player 1 has already rolled once, player 1 can now keep up to 3 dice, but cannot keep any more than 3 dice. It will not let you. And so then you can roll again. And as you can see, the player one rolled 2 ones, and so they took half of the score, rounded up, and took it to the bank score. And now it is player 2's turn. If we want to load up the other game and show you how that one works, it is simpler, but it's still good to show. So if the player decides they want to play 2-die pig for a quicker game experience, they can choose to play 2-die pig, in which first instructions, then just like the 6-die version, except now there's only 2 dice, still has the GUI lamps, you can still roll dice, it'll still display the previous play, you can still bank your turn or bank your score when you end your turn. However, you can no longer keep dice. That is not a function that we coded in for the 2-dice version. I will now show you kind of how the points are divvied up in the program. So as you can see here, I have rolled a royal flush, and it says that I have gotten 46 points for this turn. So I'm going to show you that the program is indeed counting up the extra points. So we have 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6 for the dice rolls. And this essentially, we have 6 here, we have 9 here, and we have another 6. So then that's 12 plus 9. So the total points of simply the dice would be 21, if I'm counting correctly. And then as you can see, we rolled a royal flush, so that should be an extra 25 points. And so as you can see, that's 46 points total for that play, and the player got 46 points total for that play.
This is our demonstration of what happens with our app when you win. For the purposes of this demonstration, the cap for winning, first, the score has been lowered in order for us to demonstrate. And here we have the win screen, where you can either continue playing the same game or return to the main menu so that you may choose another game. And there you have it.